So today I'm pleased to be joined by Spencer Titley. Spencer, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the organization you work with?
Yeah, so I'm the fundraising and communications coordinator at the Parkdale Food Center, located in Ottawa, Canada. Um, Parkdale is a community food center who are part of the food bank agencies throughout the city. There's 97 total food bank agencies, and they vary in size from after-school lunch programs to organizations like us. And our mandate is we started out as our mandate was to provide emergency food for people who were experiencing food insecurity, and we would do that through our grocery program. But over the years, we've been around for almost 40 years. We've kind of evolved a little bit, and we've realized that it's not just that people don't have access to food regularly because they lack the income to buy it, but they also lack the resources to build community through food. We think a lot about how people interact with each other. It's often at restaurants, dining out with people, picnics, going over to people's house for dinner. And if you lack resources to buy food, you don't often do those things. So over the years, we've added a community kitchen where we serve community meals that are free, as well as a youth program, because the number one indicator of whether or not you are going to be food insecure is, other than your income, is whether or not you have children. I think there are 9 million food insecure people, just shy, food insecure people in Canada, and about 2 million of those are children. So we added a youth program called Growing Futures. And then we also created an advocacy program that incorporates wraparound supports for our neighbors. And we always use the term neighbors, not clients. We don't sell anything. So they're just members of our community. And so we provide them with wraparound supports in navigating the system, and that can be anything from, printing off documents, dealing with caseworkers, immigration, the healthcare system, applying for jobs, as well as advocating at the municipal level for some systemic changes. Because at the end of the day, regardless of what we do every day in terms of providing emergency food for people, we are not a long-term viable solution as currently set up.
So there's a lot to unpack there. So I will come back to all of those things you mentioned: the grocery program, the community kitchen. But for an organization that's been around as long as you have, how do you see the work that you're doing building community being differentiated from some of the other groups that are facing or dealing with the food insecurity challenge in the Ottawa area?
Yeah, so we are a little bit unique in the approach that we take in Ottawa, but kind of province-wide in general, in that we are trying to provide culturally relevant food to people with the dignity for them to choose exactly what it is that they're eating. So I know we'll get to the grocery program a little bit later. That is one of the ways that we're unique, is that it's set up like a grocery store. But additionally, we see food kind of as a tool to building community. We don't want to be just like a emergency food cupboard or pantry, and not to denigrate those organizations. It's necessary work, but food is so much more than a way to kind of nourish the body. One of our chefs, he has a really great line that I like to use often, where no matter what your heritage, where you come from, it has always been the case throughout space and time that people have gathered together to eat and share stories and share themselves over food. And it is kind of like that great international connector, and it's kind of intrinsic to our humanity. And we try and take that approach with all of our programs, and it does make us a little bit unique in the Ottawa area, but also in Ontario in general.
So when you're looking at food as being, culturally significant or significant in the act of building community, how are you expressing that cultural sensitivity into the communities that you're serving right now?
Yeah, so the two main ways that we do that is through the grocery program and through the community meals. So with the grocery program, um, part of the reason why it's set up like a grocery store is that we want people to choose the food that they get. And just for the background context, is most food banks, the vast majority of food banks, they will provide prepackaged hampers, boxes of food that they have available. And we set it up where similar to a grocery store. You walk in, there's shelves of food, and people will go around and shop for the food that they want. And we try and provide food that is culturally relevant to the groups that we're serving. So not just culturally relevant, but the dietary restrictions that people may have. So whether that's differentiating between halal meat and non-halal meat, you know, oh my gosh, dairy restrictions, gluten-free restrictions. Over the years, we are located right next to the Chinatown in Ottawa, so we try and provide as much, you know, let's say ethnic foods that are readily available to us. And through our community kitchens and community meals, we also try and do that. So, you know, for example, it's Lunar New Year this week. So we are actually having an intergenerational meal with our youth program and seniors from Chinatown. And it's a Lunar New Year celebration to kind of celebrate those cultural differences. And even at that meal, you know, the majority of the seniors from Chinatown don't speak English, don't speak French. And the majority of the youth who are involved don't speak Mandarin or Cantonese, but it's still a way for them just through, you know, meiosis to be around each other through hand signals to kind of interact and create relationships. And we see all the time that actually works. Even if there is huge language barriers, we see relationships that establish across generations and cultural boundaries, which is pretty unique and something that we're pretty proud of. And even extending that past, you know, this specific dinner that we're doing, our menu at the community meals, it changes every single day. We do 9 meals a week. So nine meals a month, rather, excuse me. And every single one of those meals is different. And we have 2 trained chefs on staff, but in order to kind of accommodate for those cultural differences, we also will bring in people from the community, whether they're professionally trained or not, to present meals that are unique to their cultures. So if they do not have professional training, our chefs help them with the prep work, organization, purchasing of the food, but they're still kind of leading what is being made. And if they are professionally trained, I mean, you know, then they're professionals. We just kind of say, go forth. And, you know, we serve one particular instance that I can think of is we had on Remembrance Day 3 women from Zimbabwe who came in, and they served I can't remember the name of the meal, but it's similar to fufu, and it's like a mutton stew that was absolutely to die for, and they wanted to do that because it kind of on Remembrance Day to signify that growing up in a country like Zimbabwe in the 80s that had so much turmoil, they wanted to do something in the community that presented them with this unique opportunity to build together and form relationships. And they, like us, thought, well, what better way to do that than to serve meals? So those are kind of like the 2 main ways where we'll incorporate those things into our programming.
So you mentioned that the organization's been around for 40 years. Has this always been the approach that has been taken, or is this something that has evolved and changed over time?
Oh, it's changed significantly. So, I mean, food banks did not exist in Canada, period, up until the 1980s. We kind of had the social supports in place, whether that be housing or social assistance. Wages were high enough that they were not really necessary. And as those social supports have deteriorated, starting in the 80s, food banks kind of showed up as an emergency response. And that happened almost exclusively to start in the 80s through religious organizations. So we were started out of a church basement. That's how we began. And over the last 40 years, we're still pretty involved with the religious organizations. There's, you know, the Anglican diocese, the Catholic Church in Ottawa, that where we started. We're still involved with those organizations, but we have decoupled from them from being like a uniquely religious institution to try and serve the broader community in general, regardless of your religious or background or whether you're religious at all. So that's kind of over the past 40 years. That's one way that we've changed. And when we did start off as an organization, like most food banks, where we're providing hampers and people who could just come in and they'd get those boxes. But in the past 15 years or so was when we really started to shift that mantra, because we recognized that it did lack that kind of dignity and agency for people to choose what they wanted.
What was, I mean, and maybe it's an obvious question, I don't know, but where did that shift emerge from? What was the catalyst to make that shift from an organization that was, I don't want to say doing things a traditional way, but to doing something that is a little more based around community and centered around shared experiences?
Know if there was one single thing that shifted. When the organization made that change, like it was before I worked here, but um, from what I understand, it kind of came gradually just from speaking with the neighbors and people who were using our services and asking them what they wanted. I think in the charity sector, we have this habit of telling people, especially low income people, what is best for them. And Parkdale, as far as I'm aware, for 20, 30 years now, has been trying to engage more with neighbors on their own terms. So I think it was just a gradual process of being inquisitive with the neighbors and asking them what they want, how they want things to function, and kind of taking their lead. And it's something that's kind of developed organically over time through that process.
So let's go back. You've already given some good examples of kind of and you mentioned four areas: the community kitchen, grocery, growing futures, and advocacy. Um, let's just sort of go like the grocery program you mentioned. People are coming in and they're being able to shop for the foodstuffs that is relevant to them, right? Or whether it's culturally based diets or whether it's dietary restrictions. How has that, and how do you see that continuing to evolve, especially as communities continue to evolve and change?
I mean, that's a good question. I think if you were to ask me personally, I would think that the natural evolution of this kind of programming is for organizations and food banks to kind of become more embedded in the community with community ownership of them, so that they actually turn into grocery stores that have some kind of public ownership over them. I think, as currently stated, we try and provide as much dignity as we can and as much agency to the neighbors as we can, but it is still charity, and we are still relying on the charitable actions of other community members to support us. And I think in order to become sustainable, there needs to be some kind of impetus from the public, from the community, where this kind of infrastructure, which is essential infrastructure, can be owned by the community, and where those profits can then be reinvested back into the community as a sort of public good and an alternative to these giant conglomerate organizations that dominate the industry.
So you mentioned also the community kitchen, nine meals a month. Um, is it plan to grow? What's the plan with that?
Yeah, so we are actually growing it a little bit this year with things like these community dinners. So right now we do 2 lunches a week and then 1 breakfast a month. Um, and this year we've actually secured a grant that is enabling us to host regular monthly intergenerational meals aimed at connecting the youth from our Growing Futures program with seniors. So like I mentioned, this dinner that's happening this week with Lunar New Year, that's kind of a part of that initiative. And we're hoping to kind of continue to grow that section of the program to incorporate more dinners. It's something that we heard back recently from we do a yearly survey with our neighbors to ask how we can improve and what they kind of want. And that was one regular thing that we heard back, is more dinners. So it's something we're trying to grow. But again, it's an issue of income and whether or not we have the revenue to be able to put those dinners on.
So you mentioned Growing Futures. Can you just give a little bit of color to what that is in terms of your youth engagement strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. So Growing Futures, it's a program that's been around for I think about 8 or 9 years now. And it's a co-op placement that we provide for high school students. So they'll join us. It kind of varies. We'll do 3 or 4 cohorts a year, and those cohorts, it depends on what their particular co-op requirements are. So throughout the summer, it's a little bit more condensed, whereas the other months it's more spread out. But generally about 6 to 8 weeks is how much time they spend with us. And they will come in and learn basic kitchen skills, how to work at the grocery program, and a little bit more of this, on-hand work experience that you would expect from a co-op. But they also learn about states of food insecurity. They put on presentations for mostly elementary schools, but not exclusively, to try and incorporate other students into the work that they do. And they also kind of lead some research initiatives that are being done. So right now, for example, they are a part of a research team in partnership with the University of Ottawa that is doing research into food insecurities in public schools. So it will vary from cohort to cohort, but it's essentially a work co-op, placement co-op for students, and they'll be able to interact with neighbors. And it's not a rule that these students come from food insecure households. We do have some, just because of how prevalent that issue is, who are from food insecure households who have lived experience, but it's not necessarily something that is mandated by us when people apply for a co-op. So we also have some cooperation between class lines for kids who don't really know that this problem exists that much or how prevalent it is.
So I want to just touch on the last thing that you mentioned earlier, which is advocacy. Your role as an advocate for kind of your neighbors in the community that you're serving. How do you play a role in that advocacy work to improve the food security system for the neighbors that surround you?
Yeah, so separate from the wraparound supports, which is really kind of neighbor focused on how we can help them, our main advocacy goals are around public education on the issues that neighbors face when they use our services. So we have a program called Advocacy in Motion, where we have a collection of neighbors with lived experience who will come in and basically work with us to provide detailed information on the issues that neighbors face living in poverty and experiencing food insecurity. We then use that information to inform the kinds of advocacy work that we do and the messaging that we do. And most of that is done as a general education for the community that we are located in, but also Ottawa as a whole. Because I come from a place of privilege where I was not particularly aware of the issues that people who were food insecure faced. It was not something I had to deal with when I was growing up. And I think that there's quite a few misconceptions that around these issues. People often will come to us with ideas on how to fix the problem, such as, let's build community gardens and stuff. And I'm all for it. I'm part of a community garden, but at the end of the day, we are not going to be able to feed the 1 in 4 roughly households in Ottawa that are food insecure just through community gardens. And those different touch points provide us with ways that we can educate the general public about what these issues are. And that is income. It's the lack of income. We produce far more food than is consumed in Canada. And the limiting factor is access, and that's access through income. So whether we're talking about minimum wage increases to a living wage, universal basic income increases to social assistance, housing supports, public transit supports, child care supports, it's reducing the financial burden on people in poverty who are experiencing food insecurity. That is kind of the key takeaways that we get from listening to our neighbors. And then we then take that and try and promote it as much as we can.
So how can people help out, or how can people get involved in your work?
Yeah, so we are always looking for volunteers. That's a big thing. We do bi-monthly volunteering orientations where we kind of give you the who, what, when, where, how of our organization, and then you can sign up for shifts that way. And the other one is financial. last year, I think over 90% of our income came from grassroots donations. That's not atypical for food banks. That's another misconception that we try and talk about with our advocacy is people think that we are publicly funded. We are not. The Ottawa Food Bank, which is a much larger organization than us, I think it's about 2% of their funding comes from the municipal government. We don't receive any money from the provincial government, no money from the federal government. What we do receive, we will get through grants, which are pretty restrictive. So it's mainly through donations. That's the biggest way that people can help. And it's kind of what keeps us going is the generosity of the community. So whether they want to go to our website and become a monthly donor, that's a huge way to do it. Right now, we have almost 700 monthly donors, and the median donation is about $30 a month. And that kind of consistency where we know that every month that $30 is going to come in from almost 700 people allows us to plan better, to create new initiatives. Another way is that if you are connected with some kind of business or industry, especially if it's food related, to give us a call and see what kind of partnerships that we can do. So we do have partnerships with local restaurants and local producers and retailers who will provide us food at discounted price or at cost. And that's like another really critical way that people can get involved, hosting fundraising events for us. People have different ways of doing that, whether it's, if on their birthday, instead of giving them, getting their friends to bring them a birthday present, it's like, hey, here's $10 to Parkdale. Organizing a toiletries drive, because toiletries is always something that we need and are looking for our neighbors. So there's various ways that you can get involved, whether it's with your time, with your connections, or with your wallet. But we try and accept all forms of assistance that we can.
So if somebody wants to support you with their time, their treasure, or their talent, what's the best way to get in touch, and how do they get more information? What's the website or any of the social media platforms that you use?
The social media, the website's parkdalefoodcenter.ca. I will note there is a Parkdale Food Center in Toronto. That is not us. We are the Ottawa one. There's no relation. I think that's just happenstance that there's another organization with the same name. So our contact information is on there. You can send an email to info@parkdalefoodcenter.org, or to me directly, it's spencer@parkdalefoodcenter.org. And then if you want to kind of follow what we're doing, we have a LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, which are all, I think on Instagram is just Parkdale Food, same thing on Facebook, and LinkedIn, I think it's Parkdale Food Center. And we also have a monthly newsletter where people can get a little bit more in-depth detail on advocacy things we're reading, programming updates, community updates, whether they're related to us or not. We try and provide a community resource for people who live around here, with fun little tidbits, stories. So those are kind of the main channels, but you can either email us, DM us. We love that. Through any of those avenues. Yeah.
Spencer, thanks for taking some time out of your day and sharing with this audience the important work that you and Parkdale Food Center is doing up in the Ottawa area. Have a great afternoon.
Oh, thank you so much, Craig. I really appreciate the opportunity, and all the best. Yeah.